Yes, folks, it's Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. Do please like and subscribe. It's down there, folks. Yeah, you can do that. If you would, it's very kind. And maybe have a look at my interviews with James English and Sean Atwood. And there's a connection there to my book on Amazon. I'm going to talk today about one of the infamous inmates that I connected with during my time as a prison officer and immediately after leaving the prison service, and that's a man called John MCVICAR. Now, I met MCVICAR shortly after the Strangeways riots in 1990. He was at liberty at the time. He'd been released from prison, and he was commenting on the riots and seemed to think that it was all a matter of the staff abusing the inmates, and that the inmates had finally decided that they were they'd had enough of this. I can see that he got a point with that, because certainly at the time, Strangeways Jail was what's known as a screw's neck. But I found John MCVICAR to be rather self-opinionated and full of his own self-importance, as opposed to actually paying attention to the facts and considering what the people who were involved in the actual riots were saying. He had more of an opinion about what he thought about these things, and was intent upon putting his personal slant, because he was very anti-authoritarian. I mean, I'm not a particularly great lover of the system myself, as you've probably gathered. But at the same time, there has to be a degree of acceptance, otherwise society won't function. But John MCVICAR was an out-and-out rebel. He didn't start as a big-time criminal. If you care to take any interest in his life, John MCVICAR was born in 1940, and by the time we got into 1956, 57, he was already imprisoned, but it wasn't for anything excitingly dangerous or anything like that. He was just a petty thief. He was robbing stores and breaking into houses, and it wasn't until in his late 20s that he became an armed robber. And he was incarcerated in HMP Parkhurst, which was a top security jail on the Isle of Wight. It's still there, but it's called something else now, isn't it? Yeah. But Vicar escaped. He had a number of escapes, and he seemed to think, I mean, if you've watched the film MCVICAR, it's quite clear, that the message that's coming across from John MCVICAR is that he is what Friedrich Nietzsche termed Superman. Man and Superman. Das Supermensch, yeah? Except that John MCVICAR isn't really, is he? I mean, he was just an opportunist who broke out of prison. And when he managed to get out of one prison, he got some London gangster called Joey Pyle to help him, and Joey Pyle picked him up and set him off to get to London, and the police stopped thinking. MCVICAR jumped out the car and did a runner. In the film, the part of John MCVICAR is played by Roger Daltrey, who was the lead singer of The Who. Yeah, I thought he did a real good job of that. It showed MCVICAR to be a self-opinionated, supercilious shithouse. That's where he came across to me. He wrote a book about the murder of Jill Dando, which a good 30% of it was little more than the fantasies of MCVICAR. And subsequently, when the individual who had been convicted of her murder, Barry George, was exonerated, he published another book in which he omitted great sections, which was based on the first book, but omitted great sections, which John McVicar called poetic license. In other words, he made the bastard up, which I found was rather typical of Mr. McVicar. He was fast and loose with what amounted to the truth. And listen, there are people who have commented upon my work on here, and a lot of people are saying, I call bullshit on this. I'm not averse to people saying, this is all bollocks. But please do some research, Have a look. I mean, if we go back to the 1970s, you see me on television. There's recordings of me on the BBC radio stations, talking about the problems within the prison system, how the staff are being manipulated by their own trade union. Because when I was in the prison service, it may still pertain today, the Prison Officers Association was the only trade union, and they represented all the ranks, right the way from the first basic grade officers on the first day of training, right up to the most senior number one chief officer, all in the same union. Now, the number one chief officer is the right-hand man of the governor, enforcing and producing the regime and the rules and regulations that were pertaining. So how can you have a trade union that enforces the regime that they're supposed to be representing the members of the union who are coming at odds with that? The other thing, I've mentioned this many times before, it's called compulsory overtime. Now, compulsory overtime doesn't benefit the rank and file member. Doesn't. It can't. It benefits the management, but the trade union are not there to represent the management. The trade union are there to represent the rank and file. That's why we have a trade union. And do you know, listen, this amazed me. The Prison Officers Association are affiliated to the TUC, the Trade Union Congress. And when I tried to form a proper trade union that only represented the rank and file officers, the non-supervisory grade staff, when I attempted to do that, the Prison Officers Association called on the TUC to invoke what's known as the Bridlington Agreement. Now, the Bridlington Agreement was that no existing trade union will be recognised if it attempts to recruit from another trade union's membership. Well, how does that work when the trade union happens to be a tool of management? It's completely contrary to the actual nature of trade unions. Now, my great-grandfather, Robert Blakelock, was one of the original founders of the National Union of Miners, and he led the Lancashire strike, the miners' strike in the 1920s, and he was subsequently blacklisted. He couldn't get work down the mines. I've got his picture on the wall behind me. I can't show you at the moment because it's on the other side of the room, but Robert Blakelock did that, and all they were asking for was a living wage, because they were not being paid sufficient to maintain their families. That's a proper trade union. Unfortunately, the strike broke, which is why, this is a little piece of history here, that people from the area of Wigan are known as pie eaters, because their miners from the Wigan area went back to work, broke the strike, went back to work, and they ate humble pie. You with me? That's why they call them pie eaters. Yeah. John McVicar never ate humble pie, did he? He was an arrogant shithouse to the end. And eventually, it didn't quite work out for him. He published numerous books. He wrote for The Guardian. He wrote for various other publications. He thought that the fact that he could write made him superior. As I say, he had this Friedrich Nietzsche kind of supermensch idea about his own abilities, when really he was just an elevated petty thief who actually believed that he was highly superior to prison staff and that the prisons couldn't hold him. But he did about 20 years in prison, so I think somewhere along the line he kind of missed that bit out. Anyway, just a little memory from the past there of a rather bitter, twisted, elevated minor petty thief called John McVicar, who was no hero, by the way. I have great trouble with making villains and criminals heroes. I don't believe it's a good idea. It sends the wrong message to society, you see. And glorifying somebody as damaged as John McVicar sends definitely the wrong message. And you know something? It sent the wrong message to his son, Russell, who is, I believe, still in prison, or has been in prison for a long time, and charged with armed robbery, very much like John McVicar, and attempting to break out of jails, etc., etc. It's a sad story, isn't it? I am now going to... You heard I rang the song dinger there. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, folks. This is a poem. I'm not going to torture you with singing. I could do, but I won't. Unless you make a specific request. If there's any request, I haven't heard from Paula in Scotland, or Catherine, or the goat heard from Rotherham. I haven't heard from them for a little while. Do if you've got a request, anybody else got a request, put it down below, make a comment. And this is a poem I'm going to read you now. The Way Through the Woods by Rudyard Kipling. They shut the road through the woods 70 years ago. Weather and rain have undone it again, and now you would never know there was once a road through the woods before they planted the trees. It is underneath the coppice and the heath and the thin anemones. Only the keeper sees that where the ring-dove broods and the badgers roll at ease, there was once a road through the woods. Yet, if you enter the woods of a summer's evening late, when the night air cools on the trout-ringed pools, where the otter whistles his mate, they fear not men in the woods because they see so few. You will hear the beat of a horse's feet and the swish of a skirt in the dew, slowly cantering through the misty solitudes, as though they perfectly knew the old lost road through the woods. But there is no road through the woods. Thank you very much. John G. Sutton, Tales from the Jails. Hope you enjoyed that, folks.